All right, so we're going to talk about something that just fascinates me and that I've analyzed over and over and over. And sometimes when I speak about this. And it's the rich man that ran to Jesus. Now, it's in, Mark 10:17 through 27. And it's also in Matthew 19:16 through 25. So that's a lot, but we're just going to kind of paraphrase it and just talk a little bit about it. And some of the things, there's so much that we can get out of here, these passages. But, the rich man runs to Jesus and he says, what next good thing do I need to do? Is kind of like, look at me, look at all this wealth that I have. I've kept all the commandments. And, he just lied and broke one of them right there when he said that. But just to kind of lay this out, because at the end, his disciples say, where Jesus says, well, give it all away and follow me. Now, he doesn't say that to everybody, but he knew that this guy's hang up, was his stuff. And then the guy goes away sad because he had great wealth. And his disciples are baffled. Well, then who can go to heaven? I think that there was some belief out there that having a lot of money meant that you were righteous. Why do I believe that? Well, because in 1 Timothy chapter 6, Paul dispels that. He says, look, godliness is not a means to gaining wealth. But this must have been a belief, because he was showing off. Look at all my money. I've done everything right to do all this. Is there anything else I need to do? And it's not about money, and your righteousness is not going to bring you wealth, because that's what Paul says in 1 Timothy chapter 6. You can go read that also. And I think that, like I said, because his disciples are like, wow, well, who's good enough to go to heaven then? So there's a lot here, and there's a point I want to make with this. But I'll let you go first, Victor, and then I'll come back and there's so many points that we can make in this passage. We'll try not to make this go too long, but there's a point that I want to make about it that really relates to us right now. So what are your first thoughts, Victor?
This rich man comes and is asking, what good thing can I do? And ultimately the answer that Jesus gives is there's really nothing you can do that's good. God alone is good. And when we miss that there's a higher level than we can obtain to. And everybody, even though this young man who is very rich, very blessed, even though he claims to have done all these good things, it's not enough. It is just plain not enough. And Jesus kind of sets the bar infinitely higher. And ultimately, for us who are Christians, it's until you allow Jesus himself to intercede for us and be our salvation and be our lamb before God. But this rich man has all this list of things. In our society, we list all the good works. So common is the idea that, well, I don't know how I'll get to heaven, but I just try and do good things. Well, that's not going to be enough. It is just plain not enough. And this young man senses that. He's tried all this rules and regulations, and until there is a heart connection to God himself, it's just running in circles. It's not getting you anyplace. And I just see this almost as a mini gospel right here. It's the whole story. And he's asked to give up his riches. Now, Jesus doesn't go along, for example, Levi. He pays back, Matthew Levi, pays back everything that he kind of stole and then added to it. But he still was left over with a lot of riches. Jesus didn't demand you just liquidate everything. But this man, this individual, Jesus put his finger on the issue that this young man was dealing with. And God can do that he does do that often when you read through his scripture, and he puts the finger on the issue in your life, and he brings that out and says, you got to give up some things. You've got to move on some. God has to be a priority in your life. But the young man didn't want to give all that up. And so the disciples are just scratching their heads. There's quite a bit of conversation that comes later. But it's just an amazing passage to me where it challenges us all if we're paying attention. And there's more here, but I'm going to kind of stop there. There's so much more. I'll end up talking on for hours. Yeah. I can't do that, but there's a lot here.
There is, and you can hit it from so many different angles, which is what I'm going to do right now. But I just want to emphasize that point that I made kind of at the beginning, and you also made. God doesn't, I don't know of any other time where Jesus says specifically, get rid of all your stuff. That's what you need to do. And why did he say that? Because he knew that was this guy's hang up, was his stuff. He was hung up on his stuff. His stuff was his identity. So Jesus said, you need to get rid of that, all of it. But you look at most of the times, Jesus is saying to be a good steward. The parable where of the talents, go make it grow. He got mad at the third servant who buried the talent and didn't make it grow. How mad would he have been at that guy if he gave it all away? Probably pretty mad, right? So the point was he wanted these servants to be stewards of their gifts and use them and make them grow for his kingdom. And that counts money also. So the interesting point that I always think about when I read this is this guy had all this money, right? He was very wealthy. But are we wealthy? And so I start to think, and this is just hilarious. We don't know what this guy had, but we do know what he didn't have. He didn't have one of these. That's a cell phone. He didn't have one of those. He didn't have a computer in his pocket. He didn't have a car. Not only did he not have a nice car, he didn't have a lousy car. He didn't even have a car that broke down. But if he had that, the junkiest car that you see on the road, look what he would have had. Oh my gosh. Talk about rich. I mean, if he had tons of money, maybe he had a chariot. What was pulling that chariot with the wooden wheels and, hitting the bumps and stuff? Nice ride, dude. And so we look at this guy, he's wealthy. And I think sometimes we think in terms of wealthy of what it means today, but every single one of us, every person listening to this has way more wealth than this rich guy had. So you tell me what he had. Like I said, I can tell you what he didn't have, and I just named a couple things. Did he have electricity? I don't know. They have some pretty sophistication back there, but did he have running water? This rich guy was dirt poor. He was dirt poor, but yet he didn't want to give his garbage away. What did he have? A bunch of cows? What, he's going to have a nice steak for dinner every night? Did he had maybe a bunch of servants himself. So what are they rubbing his feet? The guy's stuff was nothing. And so anyone out there listening to this, what do we have? Is anyone out there hung up on your stuff? Is your stuff, are you making your stuff more important than you should be? What's that? Remember that comedian? He's recently passed, George. He did the whole stuff thing. His name was George something. And he'd always talk about his stuff. And there's just so much humor around him talking. You know what I'm talking about? Talking about his stuff. Carlin. Yeah, George Carlin. I think that was his name. Yeah. And he was just so funny talking about his stuff. Hey, that's my stuff, you know? And that's how this guy was. But are we like that? Hey, that's my stuff. That's mine. That, that's my little this or that. That's mine. That's mine. Are we clinging on to it in ways that we shouldn't? So that's just something that I want to challenge people with is, what about your stuff? What are you doing with your stuff? How important is your stuff? And is it really that spectacular? 1,000 years from now, is this going to be what everybody's raving about? Or is it going to be something better? What do you think?
Well, the best thing is to walk with God in complete honesty. And I was writing last night. I do a lot of writing in preparation for things, and just realizing, for me, it's been almost 5 decades of following Jesus, and there is just nothing better. You let go of your stuff and you follow after Jesus, and suddenly there's just blessing that is. I have schoolmates, classmates, people that I kind of followed in college, and I am rich because of the work of Jesus. And I don't think there's anybody I would trade with or even come close to considering it, because Jesus gives us those riches in fullness. And once we let go, and I know for me, it's hard to let go of some things, but as we let go, it just begins to flow in a different sort of manner that is so much more superior than what we're trying to grab hold of. It's far beyond this, and we've discussed this concept at length, but I keep going back to Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and and anyone else can put in that list. They can't afford a broom closet in heaven. They can't, because they haven't earned that until they turn to Jesus, and Jesus gives that to us. And that is just such an amazing, wonderful, full richness. And this young man, he knew he hadn't arrived. And I meet so many people that they know they haven't arrived. They haven't done it all or done enough. They sense this lack of blessing in their life. And that's what I want to give to people. And I think that's part of, the reason we're doing these interviews is because we want to give the love of Jesus and the fullness of living and walking in him. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, great input as always, Pastor. So thank you, and thanks for being with us, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, great.